Hello, welcome back. We are doing Proverbs and Wisdom Literature today. This is lesson 19 and this is part 2. Proverbs. The title of the book of Proverbs in Hebrew is Mishalei Shlomo. The sayings or the Proverbs of Solomon. And the word Mishalei is plural. It's also pertaining, that's what the yud does, it means of Solomon. The word is mishal. And a mishal is a saying, it is a teaching, or it is a parable. Now in Hebrew thought, a proverb and a parable are the same thing. They're both examples of wisdom literature. And the word mishal itself is a meaning. When we use the phrase, the moral of the story is, that sums up the word mishal really quite well. And you'll see that both proverbs and parables are intended to have meanings behind them. When we finish listening to them and thinking about them, we're supposed to come up with an insight. That insight is the mishal. Now, it's interesting to note how the Hebrew word comes about, because in Hebrew, every verb has a 3-letter root. In this case, mem, shin, lamed, MSL effectively, and that root can develop into anything up to 7 different families of verbs. Each family has a slightly different meaning and a slightly different form of verb. So for example, in kal, which is the easiest, that's what kal means, it means light. The verb mishal means to rule oneself, to guide oneself, to guide in life. In the nif'al, which is one of the passive forms, families of verb, it means to be like. And in the hifal, it means to compare. And you can see that because that's what you have to do in both a proverb and a parable. You have to compare. And in fact, that's what a proverb is going to do. It's going to compare different things in order to find meaning. Now, Proverbs is a compendium of material. It doesn't all have one source. It has distinct sections by different authors. It dates from around the beginning of the monarchy, around 1000 BC, right up to post-exile. And as I've already mentioned, we have several books of wisdom within the Apocrypha. So this was a persistent discipline right the way up to the time of Christ. Proverbs contain several different genres. I've already mentioned that: instructions, sayings, riddles, and poems. Most famous is the aphorism. And Proverbs itself describes itself as the Proverbs of Solomon. But like I've said, it's not just Solomon that wrote it. We have other authors, the men of Hezekiah being the most famous, and of course that's quite late in the monarchy. So it's a bit of an anthology of wisdom, really, what we've got here, from early date through to late date. Not everybody agrees that it was written by Solomon. Solomon was at best responsible for part of the book, according to Longman. Very difficult to date different sections. It used to be thought that the more complex sections of wisdom, like the first 9 chapters, the bits that were more overtly theological and more complex, probably were of a later date, and the simpler pithy sayings that we're all familiar with were probably of an earlier date. But actually we've got no real evidence for that because there's no context given for us. Proverbs are contextless and therefore they are incredibly difficult to date. So we've basically given up. There is no consensus of thought as to what parts of the book are early and what parts of the book are late. There are 2 dominant metaphors that we find in the book. The first is finding a wife and establishing a house. The candidate of Proverbs is my son. And he's setting out in life and he has to find how to live his life well. And we will discover in the book whether he succeeds or whether he fails, because this really is one of the dominant metaphors. We're coming back to it. Wait till the end of the lesson. The other major metaphor is that wisdom is the tree of life. So she is a tree of life for those who take hold of her. Those who hold fast to her will be blessed. Wisdom, Sophia, is feminine. The fruit of the righteous is the tree of life. and those who win souls are wise. So we're being reminded of the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. I've already mentioned the Garden of Eden is considered a wisdom narrative. And the idea is that this tree offers life. It offers life to all those who will take wisdom. You will find life along with wisdom. But you will also see that therefore wisdom is tied into creation. It's associated with the creative activity of God, and God builds wisdom into the world, and we have to live at harmony with that creation. You can begin to see why it is that Solomon can talk about writing Proverbs in one moment and then talk about describing animals in another, because actually the two ideas are related. What is a proverb? Well, we tend to associate wisdom literature with the pithy sayings of the second two-thirds of the book of Proverbs. What we've already mentioned are called aphorism, catchy phrases of good advice. On the surface, they are easy, simple, and very applicable to our lives. But as you go a little bit deeper, you realise there are complexities here. And these are actually things that require thinking through. They are basically common sense. That's what wisdom is. Now, Proverbs are very, very hard to define and very easy to recognise. When somebody says a proverb, you recognise it as a proverb. If they ask you, how do you know this is a proverb, that becomes a little bit harder. A short sentence of wisdom. Wisdom stimulates the thought and provides insight. So wisdom is more than knowledge of facts. It's the ability to take those facts and to make them work practically in the world around us. Therefore, Fee and Stewart say, wisdom is the discipline of applying truth to one's life in the light of experience. It's an emphasis on practical knowledge, not just theory. And the wise person will know the right time. The wise person will also be in control of their emotions. In fact, when the book of Proverbs talks about patience, it's talking more about being able to understand and control the emotions that are going on in your life than it is talking about waiting for things. A wise person knows when to speak and when to be silent. A wise person knows when to act and how to act. And when temptation comes along, they will know how to respond. Wisdom, according to Longman, helps us to navigate life successfully. Proverbs stimulate thought and provide insight. And they're intended to get a response from us. We're intended to think, is this true? How is this true? Where is this true? Burke says that a proverb is a shorthand for a situation in life that recurs often enough that people felt the need to have a name for it. So one proverb that we're going to look at in a moment, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Now, the only reason that that proverb is still popular and is still heard today is that the circumstance it describes happens frequently within life, and we're being told how to deal with that circumstance. Ibn Ezra, who was a famous medieval Jewish scholar, said that it took three things to make a proverb. It took few words. That's very important in wisdom literature. It took good sense, i.e. there had to be truth within it, and it required fine imagery. So it wasn't enough that the proverb encapsulates truth. It has to do so in such a way that is pleasing to the ear. What is a proverb? Well, there's a progression in the formation of a proverb. There is an original concrete experience that gave rise to the proverb. The proverb then becomes a metaphor for experience. And then you also get questions about how and why and when it works. So, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Now, once upon a time, there was a man with a horse. The horse was thirsty, he led it to water, and it wouldn't drink. There is an entire Mythbusters episode dedicated to discovering whether you can make a horse drink. They discovered that basically you couldn't. But that's to misunderstand the proverb, because very few of us will ever lead a horse to water. the proverb itself becomes a metaphor for any time you hit an experience when, even though you do your part, you can't predict the outcome. So I can teach you, I can do these lessons, but I can't make you learn. It's the same thing. And that's what the proverb is talking about. It's actually not talking about a horse. That's why it's dangerous to say, spare the rod and spoil the child, means I have the right, according to the Bible, to hit my child with a cane. Because actually the proverb isn't about that, it's about the need for discipline, any more than this proverb is actually about a horse. But of course, once you've come up with this knowledge, you then have to figure out how it works. Why is it that you can lead that horse to water but not force it to drink? Where does responsibility lie in this? How does this work? Why does this work? When is this true? When is this not true? So you've got these three stages in the life of a proverb. And here we are reading the book of Proverbs, and effectively we're stuck with that second and third stage. We're figuring out when this proverb affects our lives, when we should actually apply this proverb, and then we're trying to figure out how it works and when it works and if it works. And in fact, in today's tutorial, which anybody watching this video isn't going to do because there is just no point, what we're going to do is we're going to open a page and we're going to read through a bunch of proverbs, and we're going to try and figure out when they apply, when they might not apply, why they work, why they might not work, how they're going to work, and all those sort of things. But because it requires group discussion, I'm not really sure I can do it over a video. Proverbs have different levels of meaning, and effectively, as the reader, we are the only context that the proverb has. Our life is the only context. And that's kind of unique for the Bible, because most of the rest of the Bible has fairly clear contexts. That means there is an incredible opportunity to find meaning in parables, but it also means there's an incredible ease with misinterpreting parables. And one of the problems that we have with the Proverbs, and this is kind of masked by our translations, is that actually sometimes the Hebrew is just plain obscure and we're not really sure what this proverb is actually saying. Now obviously as a translator you can't make it obscure, so you have to kind of take your best guess, but there's a concern in places that our best guess might not be the right one. Three categories of proverbs. Proverbs are sapiential, that means they're about knowledge on the way we see reality. They are ethical, how to conduct yourself, and they are religious. They are about God's order. So if you look at Proverbs 10 verses 1 to 3, you'll see the first is sapiential. Wise children bring joy to their father, foolish children bring grief to their mother. That's about not as an observation of the world, it's a way of seeing, and it's a fact based on that. Ill-gotten treasure is of no lasting value, but the righteousness delivers from death. We've got an ethical teaching, how to conduct yourself. Don't run after wealth, run after righteousness. And then the third in the series, the Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but thwarts the cravings of the wicked. And we actually discover this is a religious thing. So knowledge, ethics, and religion all working in together. Knowing, acting, and piety, somebody also said. Wisdom is a way of seeing the world, it's also a way of living in the world. Williams gives 4 attributes of a proverb, but hey, it's dead boring, so I'm going to skip the page. A proverb is not a promise. And this is where many Christians misinterpret the book. If a proverb was a promise, then it would be called the book of promises, not the book of Proverbs. So, for example, Proverbs 22 verse 6. Start children off in the way that they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. So, the problem here is that many of us as Christian parents have done our level best to start off our children in a certain way and discovered that when they get to a certain age they actually have turned away from it. And we actually discover that this proverb has not been true. Has God's word failed? Well, no. In fact, to take this as a promise that if you do this, then this is the bulletproof, 100% certain God-guaranteed outcome, is to misunderstand what a proverb is trying to do. And when you think about it, you realise actually kids have got freedom of will. They actually have to make their own choice. And we can't actually make that choice for them. And whether a child will go on to follow Christ, or whether they will go on to backslide, or whether they will go on to backslide for a while and then when they're much older come back to faith, there are just so many issues involved. And the problem here, of course, is that when children might backslide, one of two things happen. Either the parents get very unhappy with God because God didn't do what Proverbs said he was going to do, or people start looking at those parents and saying, well, they must have failed. Proverbs is actually an observation of life. And what it's saying is, if you want your kids to follow Christ when they are older, the best thing you can do to make this happen is to teach them while they are young. And there is absolutely no question that that's the truth. It's not a promise. What it is an observation of the most likely outcome for a situation. So if you want this outcome, this is what you must do. The best route to a desired outcome. Can a proverb become a promise? Well, the fact that Jesus taught in Proverbs kind of actually changes their nature a little bit, at least with regard to what he said. But yes, a proverb can become a promise. When God speaks this to you and says, look, this is what I want you to do and this is what the outcome is going to be, but by its nature it is not automatically a promise. It is an observation of the world around us and therefore a prediction of the future, the most likely route to a desired outcome. Thank you very much.